Imagine for a second that you had this biological currency inside your body.
Like a deeply refined resource.
Right. Exactly. A resource that is so incredibly potent, so highly refined, that it takes your body an immense amount of raw material and intense biological processing just to produce a single drop of it.
Yeah, it's a huge energetic investment.
It really is. Now imagine that every single time your mind wanders off or, every time you get distracted by some targeted advertisement or you engage in some idle flirtation on your phone, you are literally leaking this currency out of your system.
You're just bleeding it dry.
Yes, you are bleeding your own vitality, and not through running a marathon or physical exertion, but just through the sheer scattered lack of mental focus.
It really is a completely different way to look at human energy, isn't it?
Oh, totally. Because we are so used to treating vitality like it's a simple math equation. You know what I mean?
We really do. We count the calories, we count the hours of sleep.
Right. We log our 8 hours on a sleep tracker, we drink a pre-workout shake, and we just assume, well, the machine is fully charged now. Input equals output. It's this very mechanical, very safe way to look at ourselves.
It's comfortable. I mean, we like to think of energy as something we can just easily purchase or consume from the outside.
Exactly.
But when you step outside of that modern mechanical framework and you look through the lens of ancient yogic science, that entire calorie counting paradigm just shatters.
It really does.
You find yourself navigating this energetic landscape that operates on a radically different set of physiological and spiritual laws. And honestly, it demands a level of internal accountability that most of us in the modern world are just entirely unprepared for.
Which brings us to our mission today. We are exploring a profound, jarring, and honestly, an incredibly radical framework for human vitality, focus, and, well, spiritual awakening.
It really pulls no punches.
No, it doesn't. We're unpacking excerpts from a seminal treatise called Practice of Brahmacharya. This was written by Sri Swami Sivananda, and it was originally published back in the 1930s by the Divine Life Society.
Yes, and this text presents a worldview that stands in absolute unyielding opposition to our modern hypersexualized society.
And we really need to set the parameters for this exploration right up front, I think.
Definitely. I mean, if you look around today, from the shows we binge on Netflix to the algorithms that drive our social feeds, human attention is constantly being aggressively harvested.
Harvested through sexualization.
Right. And Sivananda's text looked at that exact dynamic and diagnoses it as a profound sickness.
So our goal here isn't to, moralize or preach to you. We're not telling you to abandon society and go retreat to a Himalayan cave.
But some days that sounds nice.
Right. But no, we are here to impartially dissect the source material's really fascinating psychological and physiological assertions. We want to look at what it takes to transmute raw, base physical energy into unparalleled ultimate mental power.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can dive into the actual mechanics and the daily practices of Brahmacharya, Sivananda forces us to confront the core disease that it's meant to cure.
We have to look at the fundamental human condition.
Exactly, the phenomenon of the sex urge. And like you said, he doesn't sugarcoat it at all.
What's fascinating here is how Sivananda brutally simplifies human behavior. I mean, he looks at the vast, chaotic complexity of human life and distills all those driving motivations down to just two primary forces.
Disc and ego.
Yes, sex and ego. He argues that the desire for a mate is the most deep-rooted instinct in human beings. It is the absolute oldest, most foundational factor in our entire biological and psychological constitution.
So he's saying it underpins everything else.
Everything. The text asserts that literally every other desire you harbor, like your drive to build wealth, your desire to own property, your ambition to, climb the corporate ladder or get status, all of it is fundamentally tethered back to this single central biological imperative.
Wow. And he writes, with this mix of lament and severe warning, that the entire world is operating under a tremendous sexual intoxication.
Which is wild to think about when you consider the context. I mean, he was writing this in the 1930s.
Right, the 1930s.
He was critiquing a world where going to the cinema or wearing cherry blossom face powder and styling bobbed hair was considered like the height of dangerous intoxication.
It's almost quaint by today's standards.
Right. It makes you wonder, if he considered the 1930s to be highly intoxicating, What would he even call the landscape of the internet today?
Oh, he would likely view it as the ultimate tragic manifestation of the exact same principle, just, accelerated to the speed of light, because his fundamental argument isn't really about the medium.
It's not about movies versus smartphones.
Exactly. It's about the vulnerability of the mind itself. And this actually leads to one of the most provocative and, frankly, most difficult arguments in the entire source material for a modern reader to process.
Nice.
Sivananda argues that sex and physical beauty are not objective realities at all. They are merely mental concepts. They are illusions.
Oh, wow. So he leans heavily into that Sanskrit concept of Maya, right? The grand cosmic illusion.
Yes, exactly. Maya or nescience. He is essentially saying that physical beauty is just a trick played on our consciousness, and to snap the reader out of this illusion, he uses a technique that is visceral, almost morbid.
He goes hard on the biology.
He does. He asks, why are highly intelligent humans so completely enslaved by what he calls a bundle of bones?
A bundle of bones. That's so stark.
He deliberately strips away all the romantic poetry. In fact, he actually criticizes poets in the text for causing immense damage to the minds of youth.
Because they describe, faces like the moon or lips like honey.
Exactly. Sivananda points out that if you look just a fraction of an inch behind that beautiful skin you are admiring, what do you actually find? You find raw flesh, bone, bodily fluids, pus, and phlegm.
It's a total biological reality check designed to induce shock.
Right. He writes that if you take away the external skin and the fancy silk clothing, you would literally have to stand next to that same body with a stick just to drive away the vultures.
Oh my God, that is an aggressive mental pivot. But I tried to find a way to conceptualize this for today. And the best way to understand what he's getting at is to think about a virtual reality headset.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Because when you put on a high-end VR headset, you might see this breathtaking, beautiful landscape, right?
Yeah.
And your brain reacts to it. Your heart rate might change. You feel awe.
But the landscape isn't actually real.
Exactly. It's just a sequence of ones and zeros being projected into your eyes.
Yeah.
Your mind is the thing rendering the beauty.
That makes perfect sense.
So Sivananda is essentially telling the reader to take the headset off and look at the raw biological code. The physical form is just the code, the flesh and the bone. The intense, intoxicating beauty you feel is entirely rendered by your own mind's desires.
That is an excellent way to frame it. The mind projects the beauty onto the object. The beauty isn't sitting inherently inside the physical form itself.
But I do have to play devil's advocate here for a second, because I'm sure you were thinking this too. Isn't this a deeply cynical way to live?
How so?
Well, we are biologically wired to appreciate a beautiful face, right? We appreciate a gorgeous sunset, or the intricate petals of a blooming rose, or a sweeping mountain range. If appreciating beauty is a natural human capacity, why is looking at a beautiful human form considered this dangerous trick of Maya? Why demonize it?
This raises an important question, and it's a crucial distinction that the text makes very clear to avoid that exact cynicism you're talking about. Sivananda does not forbid the appreciation of beauty.
No, he doesn't.
No, he is not saying the world is inherently ugly. In fact, he explicitly states that you can admire the beauty of a person exactly in the same way you admire the beauty of a rose or a starry sky or a piece of fine art.
Okay, but what's the catch?
The catch is that you must see it as the beauty of the creator, the underlying divine architecture. What the text vehemently warns against is the lustful look.
Ah, okay, so it's the intent and that physical craving attached to the observation.
Exactly. It is the attachment and the deep desire to possess or consume the object. Sivananda breaks down the mechanics of how this lustful look operates, and he uses the metaphor of Cupid's arrows.
But I assume this isn't the cute cherubic Cupid of Valentine's Day.
Not at all. This is a sequence of psychological hijacking. He says lust acts like a flowery bow equipped with 5 very specific arrows, and they strike in a devastating progression.
What are the 5?
Fascination, stupefaction, intoxication, emaciation, and finally, burning.
Okay, let's break that progression down because it perfectly maps onto the modern psychology of obsession. First, you have fascination, right? A form catches your eye. It stands out from the background noise of reality.
Yes, and if you don't break the gaze right then and there, the second arrow hits stupefaction.
Which means?
The object begins to arrest your attention completely. It paralyzes your other streams of thought. You forget what you were about to say, you lose your train of thought, you are literally stupefied.
Wow. Then comes the third arrow, intoxication. Now it's acting like a chemical drug in the brain. Reason starts to slip away, and you are enveloped in a haze of desire.
Which leads to the fourth arrow, emaciation. And this isn't just physical starving, right? It's a psychological pining.
Like when you're separated from the object of desire.
Exactly. And the craving begins to consume your internal resources. You feel hollowed out, just longing for it.
And finally, the fifth arrow is burning. The heart and mind are completely inflamed. The obsession has taken total root. And the most terrifying part of Sivananda's analysis here is his observation that these arrows entirely bypass the intellect.
They don't even consult your logical brain.
No. He writes that Cupid can take highly educated people, we're talking about brilliant professors, skilled doctors, rigorous research scholars, and turn them into what he calls sporting lapdogs.
Sporting lapdogs.
All their academic training, all their logic, all their philosophical understanding is utterly useless when that biological sequence begins. The intellect is just hijacked by the lower biological urge.
Because the intellect operates on a completely different frequency than primal desire. And this is why the text contrasts this state of constant low-level intoxication with the state of a true sage known as a jnani.
What's the difference for a sage?
According to Sivananda, a sage who is firmly established in the practice of Brahmacharya sees the eternal self, the Atman, the underlying consciousness, in absolutely everyone.
So they see past the VR headset, basically.
Exactly. Because they see only that underlying reality, the text asserts that to a true sage, there is no difference in their internal feeling whether they are touching a book, a piece of wood, a stone, or a human body.
That is profound.
It is. The concept of sex, the mental categorization of male and female forms as objects of desire, is completely erased from their consciousness.
So if the mind's imagination is the trap, if we were all basically walking around with these VR headsets on, projecting our desires onto bundles of bones, letting our intellects get hijacked by these 5 arrows, how do we break the cycle?
Right. How do you actually fight back?
How do we build a defense against something so deeply ingrained in our biology? And that brings us to the actual architecture of Brahmacharya and the literal alchemy of human energy that Sivananda proposes.
Now, when you mention the word Brahmacharya to most people who have a passing familiarity with yoga, they usually translate it simply as celibacy.
Just not having sex.
Right. But Sivananda defines it in a much broader, much more demanding way. The literal translation of the word is conduct that leads to the realization of Brahman, or the Supreme Self.
It's a whole way of living.
It is not just about abstaining from physical acts. It is absolute purity in thought, in word, and in deed. It requires the mastery and control of all the senses, not just the reproductive organs.
Right. He makes it incredibly clear that merely stopping physical behavior while the mind is still raging with desire is fundamentally incomplete.
And actually dangerous.
Yes, dangerous. To show how subtle this practice is, he outlines a highly categorized system of 8 distinct breaks in Brahmacharya. And walking through this list is fascinating because it shows how early the energy starts to leak.
Let's go through them.
Number 1 is darshan. That means looking at the other sex with passionate resolve. Just looking.
The physical act hasn't even crossed the horizon yet.
Exactly. But by simply allowing that lustful gaze, the seal is broken. The leak begins.
Number 2 is sparshan, which is touching. Then number 3 is keli, meaning play or joking around.
Wait, so even joking around is a break?
Yes. This includes flirtatious banter, that subtle teasing that builds tension. In the yogic view, this play is an energetic transaction. You're giving energy away.
Wow. Number 4 is kirtan, which is praising the qualities of the other sex. Even if you were just sitting privately with your friends discussing how attractive someone is or admiring their physical traits, the text considers that a break in Brahmacharya.
You are letting your mental energy flow outward toward the object of desire.
That is a staggering level of strictness. Number 5 is guhyabhashan, which is talking in private, seeking out intimacy in isolation.
Number 6 is sankalpa. This is the mental determination. It's when the mind stops just drifting and actively locks in on a plan, plotting how to be with that person.
The scheming phase.
Right. Number 7 is achavasaya, physically nearing the other sex with clear desire, the approach.
And finally, number 8 is kriyanavritti, the actual physical act itself.
What's terrifying and honestly brilliant about this list is that it completely tracks with modern behavioral psychology. Think about social media today.
Oh, absolutely.
Platforms are essentially massive machines engineered to facilitate the first 4 breaks: looking, playing, praising, and messaging in private.
We spend hours a day engaging in darshan and kirtan on our screens. And Sivananda's assertion is that even if you only ever engage in those first few mental and verbal steps, you are already suffering a massive energetic loss.
Yes. The text asserts that by mentally fantasizing or engaging in flirtation, you are causing the vital energy to separate from your blood. You are mentally enjoying the object, and as a result, the physical energy prepares to escape.
Which often happens involuntarily later, right? During sleep.
Exactly. You don't have to reach step N to lose the essence.
Here's where it gets really interesting. To understand why he cares so much about this energy, we have to talk about what he calls Veerya, the vital fluid. Sivananda roots his entire argument deep within ancient Ayurvedic biology.
Yes. In Ayurveda, digestion isn't just about extracting calories for immediate fuel. It's a long, complex refinement process that creates 7 datas, or essential tissues.
The Sapte Datus. It is this beautiful, cascading biological framework. According to this medical science, the food you ingest undergoes a transformation.
Out of the digested food comes chyle, a milky bodily fluid. That is the first extraction.
And then over a period of days, out of that chyle, the body refines blood.
Right. Out of the blood, it refines flesh. From the flesh, the body extracts fat.
From the fat, it builds bone. From the bone, it generates marrow.
And finally, the absolute last essence, extracted and refined from the marrow itself, is the seminal fluid, the Veerya.
It is the ultimate quintessence of the physical body. Just think about the amount of biological labor required to produce it.
It's massive.
The text states that it takes 40 drops of blood, or according to some stricter Ayurvedic traditions, 80 drops of blood to manufacture just one single drop of this vital fluid.
That really drives the point home. It is the absolute highest biological currency your body is capable of producing. It is the culmination of everything you eat, drink, and digest.
And Sivananda points out that this energy does not just sit inertly in one localized part of the body. In its conserved state, it exists subtly in every single cell.
It is the life force that gives the skin its radiant shine, the eyes their magnetic spark, and the brain its incredible retentive power and stamina.
It is only under the influence of sexual excitement, those mental arrows we discussed earlier, that this subtle systemic energy is drawn out from the cells, localized, and then lost.
Which brings us to a foundational concept in the text, the 3 pillars. Sivananda states that mind, prana, which is the vital breath or the subtle nerve currents, and virya are 3 interconnected links of one single chain.
They are the 3 pillars that hold up the human building.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of yogic philosophy, this interconnected circuit is the key to mastering human consciousness. They move together.
So if the mind becomes agitated by a desire or a visual stimulus, say you see an attractive image, the mind moves.
Instantly, the prana, the vital air, begins to move. Your breathing pattern changes, your heart rate shifts, your nervous system activates.
And when the prana moves, the virya falls. The vital energy moves downward and outward, preparing for release. It's an automatic cascading trigger.
But the brilliance of yoga is that the reverse is entirely true.
Right. Control one pillar, and you automatically control the other 2. If you restrain your breath through pranayama, deliberate breathing exercises, the mind is forced to calm down, and the vital energy is locked and preserved.
And if you control the mind through deep meditation, the breath naturally slows to a crawl, and the energy is kept stable. It's a closed-loop system.
Sivananda issues a severe, uncompromising warning regarding this system. He states that wasting this ultimate energy through overindulgence literally shatters the human nervous system.
Think of your nervous system like a massive electrical grid designed to carry a certain voltage. Repeatedly discharging this vital energy is like constantly short-circuiting the grid.
Over time, the wires just fray.
Exactly. The text attributes a vast array of modern ailments to this continuous loss. Early memory failure, a lack of emotional resilience, chronic anxiety, lack of moral courage, and even a dull, pale complexion.
But conversely, the promise is incredible. If this energy is conserved and drawn upwards, it creates what the yogis call brahmatejas.
A literal radiant aura.
A glow of health and an immense, almost superhuman intellectual strength.
So knowing the staggering value of this energy, understanding that it is the 80 drop of blood essence of your life force, the practical question becomes, how does a person actually handle this?
Because you live in the world. You have a biological body.
Right. You can't just turn off the reproductive drive through sheer will. How do you deal with these inevitable physical and mental urges without just repressing them, pushing them down, and eventually having a psychological breakdown?
Exactly. And this leads us to a vital distinction in the text. The difference between sublimation and suppression. We were talking about the upward flow of energy. Sivananda is incredibly explicit on this point. He repeatedly warns against the dangers of mere suppression.
He actually mocks people who try to just violently, artificially crush the urge.
Yes, he notes instances of individuals doing extreme foolish things. He mentions people swallowing tons of nux vomica, which is a highly toxic, poisonous plant extract, believing it will kill their sex drive.
He even references those who resort to physical mutilation or amputating organs to escape the urge.
Which is horrifying.
It is. And he dismisses all of this as profound ignorance because, as we established earlier, the lust is seated in the mind, not in the physical organs. You can destroy the organ, but the mind will still crave.
Suppression is an immense psychological danger. If you just grit your teeth and push the desire down into the subconscious without actually changing its nature, it doesn't just disappear.
It hides in the dark corners of your mind. It festers.
And the text warns that when you are in a moment of weakness, maybe you're sick or exhausted, or your willpower dips after a long day at work, that repressed desire will surge up and attack you with redoubled force.
It will manifest as deep irritability, restlessness, and terrible, disturbing dreams.
It is remarkably similar to the classic Freudian concept of the return of the repressed.
Absolutely, but articulated through the lens of ancient yogic science. Therefore, the goal of brahmacharya is not to kill the energy. The goal is to transform it.
The text refers to the successful practitioner as an ordvaretas.
Yes. This is a Sanskrit term for someone in whom the seminal energy flows upwards towards the brain. There it is refined and stored as Ojas Sakti, which translates to deep spiritual energy.
This is the crux of the alchemy. Sublimation is a positive, dynamic conversion process. You are taking raw, heavy material energy and converting it into a high-grade, subtle spiritual fuel.
I love the analogy of a hydroelectric dam for this.
Yes. If you have a massive raging river that represents your raw biological sex drive, you don't just build a thick concrete wall across it and try to stop the water entirely. That's suppression.
The river doesn't stop flowing. Eventually, the water pressure will build up, it will crack the concrete, break the dam, and flood the entire valley below,
causing massive psychological destruction.
Instead, you build a sophisticated system that channels that raging water through carefully constructed turbines. You allow the water to flow, but you entirely change the manifestation of its power.
The friction and flow spin the turbines to create electricity. That is sublimation. You are turning the heavy, dangerous river into light and heat for a city.
You turn the river into light.
But, and I'm sure anyone listening is asking this exact practical question right now, how does one actually flip this switch? It's easy to talk about turbines, but how do you mentally build them when the biological urge hits?
Sivananda is a pragmatist, and he provides highly specific, actionable techniques for this. The first line of defense is a psychological tool called pratipaksha bhavana.
What does that mean?
This is the method of generating counterthoughts. When a lustful thought suddenly enters the mind, the absolute worst thing you can do is wrestle with it.
Because fighting the thought requires giving it your attention.
Exactly, and attention is energy. Wrestling just feeds it.
So what do you do instead?
You immediately, ruthlessly replace it. Sivananda advises summoning a vivid image of your favorite deity or holding the mind on a pure, elevated concept.
Or using the bundle of bones reality check.
Yes, exactly. You purposefully visualize the stark anatomical reality of the physical body, the blood, the marrow, the eventual decay, to induce a sudden feeling of disgust and profound detachment. It's a rapid mental override.
It is an aggressive mental pivot. You don't negotiate with the urge, you change the channel entirely.
Exactly. Then there's the practice of japa, which is the constant rhythmic repetition of a mantra, such as chanting Om.
Because sound is vibration.
Right. By continuously repeating a sacred syllable, you are creating a new, high-frequency vibration within the mind. This steady, high frequency acts like a jamming signal, disrupting and dissolving the low-frequency vibrations of lust and base desire.
And he doesn't just rely on mental tricks, does he? He prescribes very specific physical tools. He utilizes specific yoga asanas, or postures, to aid this upward flow.
Yes. He places enormous emphasis on inverted postures, particularly Sirsasana, the headstand, and Sarvangasana, the shoulder stand.
Because in the yogic physiological framework, gravity and physical inversion are used to manipulate the subtle energetic currents.
By physically turning the body upside down for extended periods, you are enlisting gravity to help force the prana and the Veerya to flow upwards, away from the lower centers and towards the brain.
He also highly recommends Uddiyana Bandha, which is a deep abdominal lock that actively draws energy up from the lower chakras into the solar plexus.
No, Sivananda is brutally honest about the difficulty of this path. He asserts that a microscopic minority of humans ever achieves perfect, absolute sublimation. He points to towering historical sages like Sankara.
But he offers a massive, tantalizing promise to the average person who's willing to put in the work.
He states that anyone practicing strict, unbroken continence for a period of 12 years can achieve an absolute transformation.
12 years, wow.
Yes, 12 years. He promises superhuman memory, incredibly sharp problem-solving abilities, and a deeply magnetic personality. 12 years is the time required to completely rebuild the nervous system and store up a massive reservoir of that Ojas Sakti.
But here's the catch. To sustain that intense mental alchemy for even a fraction of those 12 years, the physical vessel has to be perfectly tuned.
You cannot run a high-voltage electrical current through cheap frayed wires.
Exactly. The body has to be prepared to handle the energy. And this brings us to Sivananda's physical regimen. He places a massive, almost overwhelming emphasis on what enters the physical body.
Because, returning to the Saptadatas we talked about, food is the literal raw material for the mind. The food you eat today becomes the blood, which becomes the marrow, which becomes the subtle energy that fuels your thoughts.
The food becomes the mind.
Precisely. If the raw material is polluted, the mind will be agitated. The text lays out incredibly strict dietary laws based on the ancient concept of the three gunas, or the fundamental qualities of nature.
So what should a serious practitioner eat?
They are instructed to consume primarily sattvic foods. These are pure, light, and harmonizing foods. Things like fresh milk, ghee, almonds, sweet fruits, and barley.
Because these foods provide necessary nutrition but are easily digested, leaving the mind calm and the nervous system unburdened.
And on the flip side, you have the forbidding categories, rajasic and tamasic foods. These are foods that induce passion, restlessness, or lethargy.
Right. He strictly forbids meat, fish, eggs, and heavy, pungent spices. Interestingly, he points out that onions and garlic are actually worse than meat for an aspirant.
Worse than meat.
Yeah, because their chemical properties intensely stimulate the lower passions and deeply agitate the mind. If you eat a heavy, spicy tamasic meal, your body has to send massive amounts of blood and energy to your lower digestive centers just to process it.
It creates excess heat, friction, and lethargy in the body, which pulls energy away from the brain.
And there is one specific dietary villain highlighted in the text that really surprised me.
Oh, the absolute war on salt.
Yes, the war on salt. Sivananda labels common salt as the worst enemy of the brahmachari.
Which is wild because we think of salt as an essential electrolyte.
Right, but he approaches it entirely differently. He argues that salt actively excites passion, creates excessive heat in the blood, and strengthens the lower senses.
He advocates for giving up salt entirely, or at the very least severely restricting it. He promises that maintaining a saltless diet brings about an incredibly cool, serene condition to the mind and the nerves.
By cooling the blood, it removes the biological agitation that leads to lust, making prolonged, deep meditation actually possible.
Beyond just the types of food, he emphasizes a practice called mitahara, which translates to absolute moderation in eating. The formula is really specific.
Oh, I remember this. Fill half your stomach with food, 1/4 with water, and leave the final quarter completely empty to allow for the movement of air and proper digestion.
Yes. He is adamant that gluttony is the death of brahmacharya. You cannot control your reproductive organs if you cannot even control your tongue.
He also views fasting as a vital tool, not just for physical detoxification, but as a spiritual kriya, a deliberate action to calm the indriyas, the senses. He says you have to fast to starve what he brilliantly calls the camel mind.
That camel mind, it's the perfect metaphor. A mind that just wants to chew and consume and wander endlessly.
And this intense dietary strictness leads directly into how the text frankly addresses a very real, often taboo subject that plagues many aspirants.
Spermaturia.
Yes, or the issue of involuntary nocturnal emissions. Sivananda clearly received countless letters from desperate youths whose health and confidence were shattered by this, and he tackles it with immense practicality.
It's a crucial part of the text because it separates the physiological reality from the psychological guilt. He differentiates between two types of emissions.
First, there is physiological pollution.
Right. This is occasional, it happens naturally, and it acts as a biological overflow or a natural cleansing of the system. It actually leaves the person feeling refreshed and energized.
He reassures the reader that there is no need to panic about occasional physiological overflow. It is just biology managing itself.
But then he identifies the dangerous counterpart, pathological pollution. This happens frequently. It is driven by deeply repressed sexual thoughts, and it leaves the individual feeling profoundly drained, depressed, irritable, and physically weak.
He attributes this pathological state to a hot, thin condition of the blood.
Which is usually caused by eating heavy, spicy food, wearing overly tight clothing, and harboring an agitated mind throughout the day.
And because he is a practical yogi, Sivananda doesn't just say, pray harder to fix this. He provides highly actionable physical remedies drawn directly from natural therapeutics to cure this condition.
He prescribes cold hip bath.
He tells the aspirant to sit in a tub of cold water with their legs out for 15 minutes. This intensely tones and cools the genitourinary nerves.
He also advises sleeping on a coarse, hard bed. Soft mattresses wrap the body and create excess heat, which stimulates the lower centers. A hard bed keeps the body cool and alert.
Furthermore, he recommends sleeping specifically on the left side. In yogic anatomy, sleeping on the left side physically opens the right nostril.
This activates the Pingala Nadi, the solar energy channel, which aids in digestion during the night and prevents heat from building up inappropriately in the lower regions of the body.
He is basically hacking the nervous system while you sleep. He also adds practical habits. Make sure you completely empty your bladder and answer the call of nature right before getting into bed.
Because a full bladder will physically press against the seminal bags during the night, which can trigger an involuntary physical release.
And finally, his ultimate cure. Wake up before 4 a.m.
Yes. In the yogic tradition, the period between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. is known as the Brahma Muhurta. It is considered the most spiritually potent, quietest time of day, perfect for deep meditation.
But on a purely physiological level, Sivananda notes that the vast majority of nocturnal emissions happen in the final quarter of the night, right before dawn, when the mind drifts into a specific state of sleep.
If you are already awake, sitting up and meditating at 4 a.m., you entirely bypass that danger zone. You take control before the unconscious mind can slip.
Okay, so up to this point in the deep dive, we've been talking about an incredibly intense, restrictive lifestyle. Eating a saltless diet, sleeping on a hard floor, taking cold baths, waking up at 4 a.m. to meditate, and treating the physical body like an ascetic laboratory.
To a modern ear, it sounds like this entire system is exclusively designed for cave-dwelling monks who have removed themselves from the world.
But the text doesn't stop there. Sivananda specifically adapts these intense practices for everyday people, for householders, for women, and he contextualizes the whole pursuit within global traditions.
This is where Sivananda's pragmatism truly shines. He fully acknowledges that not everyone is meant to be a sannyasin, a wandering renuncia.
The world needs families, it needs society to function.
He argues forcefully that a married person, a householder, can absolutely still be classified as a brahmachari.
How does that actually work? It seems like a contradiction in terms.
It works through the practice of absolute, strict moderation and pure intent. The text proposes a highly regulated approach to marital relations. It suggests that a husband should visit his wife only once a month, and strictly for the explicit purpose of progeny, of creating a child, and never for sensual recreation or mere physical release.
He argues that sexual acts for mere pleasure are simply not justifiable within this energetic framework. It is a massive drain of resources for a momentary thrill.
And he goes even further, proposing a psychological shift that is quite shocking. He says that once a child is born, the husband should mentally change his entire attitude toward his wife.
He writes, as soon as a son is born to you, your wife becomes your mother, because you yourself are born as the son.
It is a radical mental pivot. The goal is to completely sever the cord of lust within the confines of the marriage. He envisions the household not as a private space for endless physical indulgence, but as a shared spiritual ashram.
It becomes a partnership where both the husband and wife are mutually supporting each other's journey toward God realization.
Yeah. They are competing not in accumulating material wealth or finding new ways to entertain themselves, but in their spiritual sadhana, their daily practice.
Now, I have to look at this critically. Is it actually psychologically healthy to suddenly try to view your romantic partner, the mother of your child, purely as a maternal figure with no romantic connection? To a modern therapist, that sounds like a recipe for a deeply strained, disconnected marriage.
From a modern psychological standpoint, it is certainly extreme. Modern therapy emphasizes maintaining romantic intimacy for a healthy bond. But Sivananda's perspective is that human love, when rooted in physical attachment, is inherently unstable and fleeting.
So by elevating the wife to the status of a mother,
which in Indian culture is the highest, most revered, most pure form of love, he is attempting to transmute a conditional physical attachment into an unconditional spiritual reverence. Whether that is practical or healthy for the average couple today is highly debatable, but his energetic logic is consistent. Stop the leak at all costs.
And we really need to point out that Sivananda does not make this a boys' club. He applies these rules equally to women. It's not just a male practice to preserve physical fluid.
The text explores the underlying biology regarding women as well. He states clearly that sensual indulgence is just as exhausting and damaging to the female nervous system as it is to the male.
The text argues that the female ovum and the vital ovarian hormones are just as precious and just as vital to preserve for a woman's physical vitality, her mental well-being, her natural beauty, and her spiritual strength.
The energetic currency applies universally.
He calls back to history to prove this. He highlights ancient female scholars, the Brahmavadinis, women like Gargi and Sulabha, who were fierce debaters of high philosophy and science in ancient India.
These women remained voluntarily celibate their entire lives to pursue ultimate knowledge and spiritual liberation.
He urges modern women to look to these intellectual giants as role models. He wants them to focus on spiritual realization, rather than falling into what he scathingly calls the vile imitation of Western fashion, superficial beauty standards, and material vanity. He wants women to be absolute spiritual powerhouses.
And he traces the root of why modern society is failing to produce these kinds of men and women back to a systemic failure, the education system.
Sivananda heavily critiques the modern educational curriculum. He compares the modern university unfavorably to the ancient Gurukul system of India.
He argues that modern schools are incredibly efficient at pumping out atheists, clerks, and materialists who have absolutely no ethical training.
A student today learns advanced calculus, computer science, and biology, but they don't learn a single thing about self-control, mental discipline, or how to manage their own vital energy.
They have immense intellectual data, but no moral anchor to ground it.
Because in the ancient Gurukul system, a child left home to live with their teacher, and the absolute foundation of all learning was the practice of Brahmacharya.
Character building had to come before intellectual acquisition. Sivananda states point blank, "Character is power, and character is far superior to knowledge even."
He places a heavy, urgent burden on teachers and parents to candidly teach their youth about sexual hygiene, the dangers of wasting their vital energy, and the methods of conservation, rather than hiding behind a wall of false Victorian modesty.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Sivananda isn't just pulling these stringent ideas out of thin air to be difficult. He validates his claims by pointing out that the practice of strict continence is a universal truth, a common thread found across wildly different global traditions.
It is a fascinating piece of cross-cultural analysis. He points out that strict continence is a non-negotiable requirement for Islamic pilgrims undertaking the sacred journey to Mecca.
He notes the rules of the Buddhist mendicants, where breaking the vow of celibacy didn't just mean a reprimand, it meant immediate, irrevocable expulsion from the monastic order.
He references the intense asceticism of Christian monks and the bishops of the Greek Church.
He even reaches back to antiquity, bringing up the Roman Vestal virgins, who held immense political, social, and spiritual power in Rome, precisely due to their grueling 30-year vow of absolute chastity.
He's showing the reader that throughout all of recorded human history, across different continents, spanning entirely different languages and opposing theologies, humanity has consistently recognized a direct, undeniable correlation between the conservation of sexual energy and access to higher spiritual, intellectual, or supernatural power.
It is the great unifying thread of global mysticism. Conserve the base energy, access the higher realm.
So if you are an aspirant reading this in the 1930s or listening to this today, how do you find the motivation to actually do this?
To face the grueling trials of a saltless diet, to drag yourself out of a warm bed for a cold bath at 4 a.m., and to constantly battle the relentless camel mind.
Exactly. To inspire the practitioner, Sivananda provides epic role models, mythic blueprints, stories of the chase that are designed to embed the value of this practice deep in the subconscious.
In the Hindu tradition, these stories are not just fairy tales. They carry immense psychological and cultural weight. They are archetypes of perfected human behavior. And when it comes to Brahmacharya, the ultimate, undisputed archetype is Hanuman,
the mighty monkey god. Hanuman is the ultimate badass of the Ramayana epic.
He really is.
The text recounts how his jaw-dropping superhuman strength was entirely due to his unbroken lifelong celibacy. We are talking about a figure who, as an infant, looked up, thought the sun was a glowing fruit, and literally jumped into space trying to eat it.
And as an adult, when an entire army needed a specific medicinal herb, he didn't just pick the plant. He ripped the entire mountain out of the earth and carried it across the continent on his shoulders.
He was the absolute terror of the demon armies. But Sivananda explicitly states that Hanuman wasn't just a physical brute. Because he perfectly conserved his vital energy, he was the wisest of the wise.
He was a master of complex grammar, a master of the scriptures, and a brilliant diplomat. Infinite physical power paired with infinite intellect, all fueled by conserved Veerya.
Then the text offers the story of Lakshmana, the younger brother of Lord Rama. Lakshmana's story is one of supreme purity, focus, and unwavering devotion.
When Rama was unjustly exiled to the dangerous Dandaka forest for 14 years, Lakshmana voluntarily gave up his royal life and went with him, dedicating himself entirely to serving his brother and protecting Rama's wife, Sita.
And the details Sivananda highlights from this epic is just incredible. For 14 years, living in the rough wilderness, sleeping on the ground near them, protecting them day and night, Lakshmana never once looked at Sita's face or the upper half of her body.
He maintained such perfect mental and physical discipline that he only ever looked at her feet out of respect.
There is a famous scene where Sita is abducted and they find some jewelry she dropped in a struggle. When Rama asks Lakshmana to identify the jewelry, Lakshmana says he cannot recognize her arm bracelets or her earrings. He only recognizes her anklets because he had only ever allowed his eyes to rest on her feet.
That is the ultimate perfection of the chase look we discussed earlier. He never allowed the first arrow of Cupid, Darshan, to strike.
And what was the cosmic reward for that 14-year vow of unbroken continence? During the Great War in Lanka, there was a demon named Meghanada. Meghanada was literally invincible.
He had single-handedly defeated Indra, the king of the gods. He had obtained a terrifying boon that he could only be killed by a warrior who had fasted, remained awake, and remained perfectly celibate for exactly 14 years.
He thought he was immortal because he believed such a human couldn't possibly exist. Even Lord Rama himself couldn't kill this demon.
Only Lakshmana, who had unknowingly fulfilled these impossible conditions through his devotion, possessed the specific energetic purity, the massive accumulation of Ojas Sakti required to shatter the demon's invincibility.
It is a stunning metaphor for how absolute purity is the only weapon capable of defeating ultimate darkness.
And finally, Sivananda presents the story of Bhishma from the Mahabharata. This is perhaps the most dramatic, heart-breaking example of the sacrifice of vital energy.
His original name was Devavrata. He was the crown prince of the Kuru kingdom. He was incredibly strong, highly intelligent, universally loved, and destined to be one of the greatest kings in history.
But his father, King Santanu, is wandering by a river one day and falls madly, toxically in love with a fisher chief's daughter.
The king asks to marry her, but the fisher chief is cunning. He refuses to give his daughter to the king unless her future son is explicitly guaranteed the throne.
The king is heartbroken and falls into a deep depression because he loves his eldest son, Devavrata, and refuses to disinherit him.
When Devavrata investigates and figures out why his father is wasting away, he goes directly to the fisher chief. Out of pure love for his father, Devavrata voluntarily renounces his claim to the throne. He gives up his entire birthright.
But the fisher chief is deeply skeptical. He says, "I believe you will keep your word, prince. But even if you renounce the throne, you are a mighty warrior. Your future children might one day rise up and fight my daughter's children for the crown."
So Devavrata, standing there on the banks of the river, realizes that simply giving up the crown isn't enough. He has to sever his entire future lineage.
He raises his hands and takes a terrifying, world-shaking vow. He swears to live a life of strict, unbroken celibacy until the exact day he dies.
He sacrifices his entire future, his royal legacy, any chance at a family or human intimacy, simply so his lovelorn father can marry the woman he desires.
The epic says that the vow was so heavy, so unimaginably difficult, that the gods in heaven literally rained flowers down upon him and cried out, "This is verily Bhishma, the terrible."
The sheer gravity of his energetic sacrifice literally changed his name forever. Bhishma means the terrible or the formidable.
And because he made the ultimate sacrifice of his vital energy, his father, weeping, granted him a spectacular boon, the power to choose the exact moment of his own death.
He became a mighty yogi, practically immortal on the battlefield, unable to be killed until he himself chose to release his life force. Death shall never come to you as long as you wish to live.
What a staggering image of ultimate mastery.
So what does this all mean for us? We've journeyed from a critique of 1930s cinema, deep into the granular biology of Ayurvedic digestion, through intense dietary restrictions and all the way to the epic mythology of ancient India. Let's summarize what we've uncovered.
Brahmacharya, according to the teachings of Swami Sivananda, is not merely the puritanical denial of pleasure. That is a deeply Western reductionist misunderstanding of the text.
Precisely. It is a highly structured, intricately categorized system of energetic alchemy. It is an applied science of the mind and nervous system.
It is designed to take the most volatile base physical instincts of the human animal and transmute them into unparalleled, radiant mental and spiritual power. It's about making a conscious evolution from being a helpless victim of your biology to becoming the absolute master of it.
Even if you are listening to this right now and you have absolutely no intention of becoming a monk or taking a terrifying 12-year vow of celibacy or throwing out your mattress to sleep on a coarse mat tonight, Sivananda's text issues a profound challenge to all of us.
It forces you to stop and look at where your life force is leaking.
Are we slaves to our impulses? Are we slaves to our screens, scrolling endlessly, letting our vital prana be hijacked and drained by a glowing rectangle engineered to steal our attention?
Are we slaves to our diets, consuming heavy, hyperpalatable foods that agitate our nervous systems and leave us lethargic?
Or are we the conscious masters of our own vital forces?
The text demands that we stop treating our attention, our mental focus, and our physical energy as cheap, disposable commodities to be given away freely to whatever algorithm, advertisement, or passing biological urge happens to cross our path. It asks us to recognize our own profound inherent value.
Which brings us to a final, deeply provocative thought to leave you with. Amidst all the rules and mythology, Sivananda asserts one profound, unsettling concept. The physical body is a fleshy mold prepared by the mind in accordance with its desires.
That completely reverses how we usually experience reality. We are taught to think that the physical body exists first, and it generates the desires. Biology dictates the mind.
But Sivananda says no. The mind's desires, your repeated thoughts and cravings, actually act as the architect. They mold and shape the physical reality of the body.
Exactly. So think back to our opening idea of a biological currency. If you want true vitality, true unbreakable energy, you cannot just look at the biological machine. You have to look at the architect.
If your mind is the architect and your physical energy is the raw building material, take a hard look at the thoughts you've entertained today. Look at the images you've allowed into your brain. Look at the desires you've fed.
What kind of shape is your mind currently molding for your future reality?
Are you building a prison of distraction or a temple of focus?
A truly powerful question to sit with.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the practice of Brahmacharya. Until next time, keep questioning the blueprint.